Welcome to the Funeral Channel podcast, brought to you by the Funeral Program site.
That is certainly a specific way to open a conversation.
I know. I can practically hear you, the listener, reaching for the pause button or, checking your screen to make sure you didn't accidentally click on some kind of trade industry audio feed.
Uh-huh. A very niche trade industry.
Right. You're probably thinking, did I just tune into a show about stationery? Am I really about to spend an hour listening to two people talk about, paper grades and lamination? And honestly, I get it. I really do. On the surface, it sounds incredibly specific.
It does sound hyper-specific, I'll grant you that.
Right.
Most people don't wake up in the morning thinking about cardstock weight.
Uh-huh.
It's just not on the radar.
Not at all.
But that's usually where the most fascinating stories are hiding, in the things we look at every day but never actually see, the mundane objects.
Exactly, because here is the promise I'm making to you right now. This is not actually a conversation about paper. Well, it is, but it's really a conversation about history, psychology, and how we grapple with the biggest thing humans ever have to deal with, mortality. We are going to look at how a simple 2.5 by 4-inch piece of cardstock acts as a what the source is called a psychological anchor when your world is falling apart.
That's the key phrase right there, psychological anchor. That term came up repeatedly in the material we reviewed. It's the whole thesis, really.
It is. So just to give everyone a sense of what we're working with today, we have this massive stack of research in front of us.
A pretty big stack. We have practical insights from the Funeral Program site, which is, an industry leader. Then there's this really deep historical analysis from a paper called The Materiality of Remembrance.
Which was fascinating.
Absolutely fascinating. And then we have a bunch of practical guides from places like Funeral Folio and Disciple Press. So we're coming at this from all angles, the historical, the practical, the psychological.
And the mission, as I see it, is to explore this one question. Why do we need to hold something in our hands when someone dies? Why isn't just the memory enough?
It's the difference between thinking about a person and holding something that represents them. It's a profound difference.
It really is.
Precisely. When we lose someone, they become abstract,
Right.
Almost immediately. They become a memory, a ghost in the machine of our brains. And that is, frankly, terrifying for the human psyche. We are wired to interact with the physical world.
We want to make them solid again.
We want to reconcretize them. That's the perfect word. We want to make them solid again, to give them form. And historically, we do that with objects. A lock of hair, a photograph, a piece of jewelry, and this little card.
And to kick things off, I found this absolutely wild fact in the research, which I think perfectly sets the stage.
Yeah.
These little cards, the ones you get at a wake or a funeral, they didn't actually start as funeral items at all. They weren't about death initially. They started as souvenirs of faith for medieval pilgrims. Like, you'd go on a pilgrimage to some holy shrine, and you'd buy a card like a tourist buying a magnet for their fridge.
It's a great comparison, actually. It sounds irreverent, but it's functionally the same thing. You're buying a physical token of a significant experience.
A token.
And that's what we're diving into, what scholars call the materiality of remembrance. It's this fundamental question. Why does the memory need a physical container? Whether it's a medieval pilgrim in 1423 holding a woodcut, or a grieving family in 2025 choosing a photo, there is a consistent human need to turn an abstract feeling into a tangible object.
So let's establish the baseline here, because I think it's important. We've got a lot of terms flying around in these sources. We've got funeral programs, prayer cards, memorial cards, holy cards. To the uninitiated, which was me before I read all this, they all sound like the same thing. But they aren't, right? Not at all.
No, they're quite distinct, both in function and in their history and how they're used. It's really important to get the taxonomy right so we know what we're analyzing.
Taxonomy of remembrance. I like that.
Exactly. Because if you mix these up, you might end up ordering the wrong thing for the service, which is a practical stress you do not need. But more importantly, as we'll see, they serve different psychological functions during the grieving process.
Okay, let's break it down then. Let's start with the big one, the one most people have probably seen, the funeral program. This is the big folded one, usually.
Right. Think of the funeral program as the guide. Physically, this is usually a pamphlet. It might be a bifold, which is just folded once, so like a greeting card or a trifold, or sometimes even a multi-page booklet, depending on how elaborate the service is.
Like a little magazine about the person?
It can be, yes, but its primary function is utilitarian. It is the order of service.
So this is the thing that tells you when to stand up, when to sit down, and what song is playing so you don't have to mumble along.
Precisely. It guides the attendees through the event. It lists the hymns, the Bible verses or readings, the names, the speakers or eulogists. It's the roadmap for the ceremony. It answers all the little logistical questions so you can focus on the emotional purpose of being there.
So it's for the event itself.
Mostly, yes. Now, while people do often keep these, especially if they have a nice biography or photos, its primary job is to help you navigate the hour or two you're sitting in that church or funeral home. It's the script for the day.
I've been to funerals where there wasn't a program, and you do spend half the time wondering, is this the last speaker? Are we singing now? Am I supposed to know these words? It adds this layer of social anxiety to an already tense situation.
Exactly. The program removes that anxiety.
Yeah.
It lets the attendee relax into the ritual because they know what is coming next. It imposes structure on a day that feels completely emotionally unstructured.
Got it. Okay. So the program is the map for the event. Now, what about the funeral prayer card? This one seems to be the one with the deepest roots in history.
It absolutely is. The prayer card, which you'll also hear called a holy card or a mass card, is the keepsake. That's its whole purpose.
And it's tiny.
It's tiny. The standard size is roughly 2.5 inches wide by 4.25 inches high. Very specific dimensions.
That's wallet size. That's not an accident.
It is 100% by design. It is engineered for portability. It's meant to fit in a wallet or a vest pocket or tucked inside the pages of a prayer book. Its whole life is meant to be lived after the funeral.
And the context is very religious, right?
The traditional context here is deeply religious, specifically Catholic, and also high church Protestant traditions like Anglican or Episcopalian.
And visually, these are the ones with the saints on them, right? The Sacred Heart of Jesus, that kind of thing.
Correct. The classic format is a sacred icon on the front. The Virgin Mary is very common, or a specific saint that was important to the deceased, like St. Jude or St. Anthony. And then on the back, you'll have a standardized prayer, along with the deceased's name and their birth and death dates.
So it's not just a reminder, it's a tool.
It's a devotional tool. You aren't just remembering the person. You are using the card as a prompt to pray for their soul. It's an interactive object in a spiritual sense. The card has a job to do.
Okay, so program is the map, prayer card is the religious keepsake. Then what is a memorial card? Is that just a modern synonym for the prayer card?
Not quite. The sources are pretty careful to distinguish the memorial card as the more secular, or at least more versatile, cousin of the prayer card.
Oh.
It's often used in what are now called celebration of life services, rather than a formal traditional mass. The focus is different.
So less St. Anthony, pray for us, and more, here's a photo of Bob on his fishing boat.
That is the perfect way to put it, yes. The focus shifts from spiritual intercession to highlighting the personality, hobbies, and achievements of the person. It's about remembering the life they lived.
So the imagery is more personal.
Much more personal. And they might also be different shapes and sizes. You see memorial bookmarks, which are very popular, or larger postcard-sized handouts. The intent is to celebrate the life lived, rather than strictly praying for the repose of the soul.
That distinction really helps. It clarifies the intent behind the object. But I want to go back to something you said earlier about the why of all of this. One of our sources used that term, manageable anchor. I love that phrasing. Can we unpack that a little more? It feels really important.
It's a profound concept,
Yeah.
and it's the core of this whole discussion. Grief is chaotic. It is overwhelming. It's abstract. It is frightening. When you are in the throes of acute grief, you often feel like you are drowning. You feel untethered from reality.
Like the world is moving on, but you're stuck.
Exactly. The world feels enormous and empty at the same time. A card, this tiny rectangular piece of stiff paper, is a physical object that is small enough to control. You can hold it in your hand. You can put it in your pocket. You can run your thumb over the edge of it.
It grounds you. It pulls you back into your own body.
It grounds you. It serves as a bridge between the world of the living, where you're standing, holding this card, and the memory of the dead. It's a way to carry the person with you without the crushing burden of their physical absence being the only thing you feel.
So you replace the absence with a small, manageable presence.
A presence you can control. And this is key. You can't hold the person anymore, but you can hold this representation of them. You can't control the fact that they're gone, but you can control this object.
And you can control where it goes. You can put it away in a drawer when looking at it is too painful, and you can pull it out and put it on your desk when you need that comfort.
Yes, it gives you agency over your grief interaction. In a time when you feel like you have lost control over everything because death is the ultimate loss of control, this small object gives you a tiny piece of control back. It's a small act of defiance against the chaos.
That is, wow. That's heavy, but it makes complete and total sense. And it explains why these things have been around for so long. It's not just a consumer product, it's a coping mechanism that's been refined over centuries.
A piece of psychological technology, really.
Which brings us to the history. I promised everyone medieval pilgrims, and I want to deliver on that. Where do we even start?
We have to go back to the Middle Ages. 15th century, to be specific. This is where we see the lineage of the Holy Card. And as we touched on, these were originally souvenirs of faith.
So paint a picture for me. I'm a pilgrim in, say, 1450.
Okay. So imagine you're a farmer from a small village in France. You've saved for years to make a pilgrimage to a major shrine. Let's say you're going to Santiago de Compostela in Spain or Rome. This isn't a weekend trip. This is a month-long journey on foot.
And it's dangerous.
Incredibly dangerous. Roads are unsafe, bandits are common, disease is rampant. You finally arrive, you see the holy relics, you say your prayers. It's the spiritual high point of your life. You want to bring something back, something to prove you were there, and something to carry the blessing of that holy place with you.
You want a souvenir.
You want a souvenir. So you buy a small print, a woodcut, from a stall outside the church. And the sources mention a specific, very early example, 1423.
Yes, one of the oldest surviving examples is a woodcut of St. Christopher from 1423. And that makes so much sense.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And St. Christopher is the patron saint of travelers. Of course, a pilgrim would carry that image for protection on the dangerous journey home.
So it started as a talisman, a protection charm. It wasn't about someone who had already died.
In a way, yes. It was functional spiritual gear. It wasn't about remembering someone who had passed on. It was about keeping yourself alive to get home.
So how did we get from travel safe cards for the living to rest in peace cards for the dead? That seems like a really big jump.
It was an evolution of association. It happened gradually. Over time, families began to see the power in those holy images. They started thinking, well, if this image of St. Peter protects me on my journey, maybe it can help protect my mother's soul on her journey to the afterlife.
Ah, so they co-opted the technology.
They co-opted the technology. They started pairing the saint's image, which already carried this weight of holiness and protection, with the handwritten or later printed name of a deceased loved one. It was a way of placing their loved one under that saint's protection and, just as importantly, asking the community to pray for them. The card became a public request for prayer.
So it was a mashup, a remix of a religious souvenir and a death announcement.
In a way, yes. You take the holy image that protects you and you apply it to the soul of the person who has passed. But then we jump forward a few hundred years to the 19th century, and things get really formalized. We enter the Victorian era.
Ah, the Victorians. Nobody did death quite like the Victorians. They had rules for everything, didn't they?
They turned mourning into a regulated social performance. It wasn't just about being sad inside. It was about demonstrating your grief correctly to society. Mourning culture was incredibly strict, especially after Prince Albert died and Queen Victoria went into permanent mourning.
Right. She set the trend.
She set the ultimate trend. You wore specific, clothes-heavy black crepe for specific durations, depending on your relationship to the deceased. And the stationery had to match. The cards from this era were communication tools, but they were visually very heavy. We're talking somber, elaborate designs.
This is where we get the weeping willows and urns.
Exactly. Weeping willows symbolizing sorrow, urns symbolizing the mortality of the body, and of course those distinctive heavy black borders. The thickness of the border would indicate how recent the death was, and it would get thinner over time as the mourning period progressed.
The black-edged letter. You see that in movies and you immediately know someone has died.
Right. It signaled bad news before you even opened it. This is all part of what historians call the cult of memory. The idea was that preserving a person's legacy physically, through objects, portraits, and stationery, was a moral duty.
Right.
If you didn't have the right stationery, if you didn't follow the rules, you weren't mourning properly. It was as much about social standing as it was about sadness.
Wow. But then, according to the research, there's this really interesting pivot point in America, the Civil War. This part just blew my mind because it connects to something totally different: dog tags.
It's a fascinating, if tragic, pivot. It's a moment where a European tradition gets adapted to a uniquely American crisis.
A crisis of scale.
A crisis of scale, absolutely. During the American Civil War, soldiers were facing death on an industrial scale. We had never seen casualty numbers like this in American history, and the soldiers were terrified of dying and not being identified, of being buried in an unmarked grave hundreds of miles from home. That is a primal fear, to vanish without a name.
So what did they do? There were no official dog tags yet.
No, not yet. So before going into battle, soldiers started creating these small cards. They would write their names, their units, maybe their hometown. Sometimes they'd attach a small photograph, a tintype. They'd pin it to their coats or carry it in their pockets.
So these were literally precursors to dog tags. Their sole purpose was identification of the body.
Yes, strictly speaking, their primary purpose was identification. But look at the psychological shift that happens. It humanized mass casualties. It wasn't just another body, it was Private John Smith from Ohio. It shifted the concept of the card from a religious souvenir or a social custom to a deeply personal memorial.
It said, I was here. This is who I was.
This is who I was. Do not forget me. That wartime necessity evolved into the modern card we see today. After the war, that idea of combining a photo with personal details stuck. It eventually started including poetry and personal messages. It moved from identify my body to remember my life.
That is such a powerful evolution, from protect me on my journey to identify my body to remember my life. It's like the card itself has been on a journey alongside humanity.
It really has.
And now, today, we're still doing it, but we're obsessed with the quality of the object itself, which leads us to the science of paper.
The physics of touch.
I have to admit, until I read these sources, I thought paperweight was maybe the most boring topic imaginable. I mean, who cares? I usually just grab whatever is in the printer tray at home.
Most people do.
But then one of the expert sources made this point that just stopped me in my tracks. The weight of the paper dictates how important the memory feels to the person holding it.
It's subliminal, but it's incredibly effective.
Mm-hmm.
We equate mass with value. This is basic human psychology. If you hand someone a flimsy piece of paper, their brain registers it as disposable, like a receipt or a flyer you get on the street. It's meant to be glanced at and thrown away.
But if you hand them something heavy,
If you hand them something rigid and substantial, their brain registers it as permanent. It has value. Think about the difference between a cheap business card and a really nice thick one, or a wedding invitation. The weight conveys importance.
so if you print a memorial on cheap, flimsy copy paper, you are subconsciously telling people the memory is cheap or disposable.
That is the harsh reality of material science and human perception.
Yes.
Feels like an afterthought.
Wow. Okay, let's get into the specs then, because this is actually interesting now. We've got pounds versus GSM. What's the deal there?
Right. It's just two different systems of measurement. In the U.S., we use pounds or pounds. It's a slightly archaic system based on the weight of a ream of paper at its original size. It's a bit confusing.
A bit.
Okay, very confusing. Internationally, it's grams per square meter, or GSM. That one makes more sense. It's just the density of the paper. But to make it relatable, let's stick to what the sources call the feel hierarchy.
Okay, I like that. The feel hierarchy. Walk me through it. What is the bottom of the barrel?
At the very bottom, you have 20 to 24-pound paper. This is your standard office copy paper.
The stuff in the office printer that always jams.
Exactly. It's flimsy. It's translucent. If you hold it up to the light, you can almost see through it. It has no body. The sources are absolutely unanimous. Do not use this for keepsakes. It communicates that the object is temporary. If you print a memorial on this, people will inadvertently treat it like trash. It will get crumpled in a pocket or purse almost instantly.
That's a brutal assessment, but I see the point. Okay, so what's the next step up?
You hit the sweet spot. This is the 100 to 110-pound range. This is called cover stock or card stock.
Cover stock like a book cover.
Exactly like a paperback book cover. It's substantial. It holds its shape when you hold it by the corner. It doesn't flop over. This is the professional standard for a prayer card or memorial card. It feels durable. It says, keep me.
Okay, that makes sense. And if you want to go all out, the luxury option?
You go to 130-pound plus. This is really thick. It's rigid. It almost snaps if you flick it with your finger. This feels like a high-end coaster or a luxury wedding invitation. The expert insight here is that a card that feels substantial conveys reverence. It says, this person's life had weight. It literally adds weight to the memory.
It's amazing how much psychology is packed into just the thickness of the paper. It's all this nonverbal communication happening in your hand.
It really is. And then on top of that, you have the finish. Matte versus glossy. I feel like this is a constant battle in the world of photo printing, too.
Totally. I can never decide. What do the sources say is best for this specific context?
It really depends on the goal. A matte finish is soft, it's dignified, it's non-reflective. The sources point out a huge practical benefit. It's good for reading text because there's no glare, which is important in a brightly lit church or outdoors. And crucially, you can write on it.
Ah, that's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. If a family member wants to write a personal note on the back of a card before handing it to someone, You need a matte finish. You can't write on glossy with a normal pen.
But glossy pops more, right? The photos look better.
Glossy is vibrant. It makes high-resolution photos look incredibly sharp and rich. It mimics a traditional photograph. The colors are more saturated. But the trade-off is glare and fingerprints.
Oh, good.
Glossy cards show every single thumbprint. After being handled by 100 people at a visitation, they can look kind of messy. So there's a trade-off between the pop of the photo and the dignified cleanliness of the matte.
And then there's the final layer of armor.
Really
Lamination, the plastic coating.
essential for longevity. If this card is going to live in a wallet for 20 years, rubbing against credit cards and coins, getting sat on every day, it needs armor. Plain paper won't survive that.
And the sources mentioned a detail I'd never heard of. Flush cut versus extended border? What's the difference?
So an extended border is the old-school library card look, where you can see a tiny lip of clear plastic extending past the edge of the paper all the way around.
Right, it seals it completely.
It seals it completely. It is basically waterproof. Flush cut is the more modern style, where the lamination is trimmed right to the edge of the paper. It looks cleaner, more professional. The edge is technically exposed to moisture, but for most purposes it's fine. But for a true wallet dweller, that lamination is non-negotiable. It protects against tears, moisture, and time. It essentially fossilizes the paper, turning it into a permanent object.
So we've got the paper, we've got the finish. Now we have to look at what's actually on the card. This is where we get into what the sources call semiotics, which is a fancy academic word for signs and symbols, right?
Basically, yes. It's the study of how we read meaning behind images and text. And the challenge here is immense. You have to communicate a whole life and a person's spiritual identity in a space that is 2.5 by 4.25 inches.
Condensed semiotics.
Exactly. Every single pixel counts. There is zero wasted space. You are distilling a human being, a whole lifetime of experiences, into a pocket-sized rectangle. It's an incredible design challenge.
Let's talk about the imagery first. We've seen a huge shift here over the last few decades.
A massive shift. Traditionally, as we mentioned, it was all religious iconography. The Sacred Heart, the Madonna and Child, St. Jude for hopeless cases, St. Anthony for finding things or, finding your way to heaven.
And symbols, too.
And symbols. You had doves representing the Holy Spirit or rays of light representing the resurrection and God's grace. These are all visual shorthand. You see the dove, you understand the spiritual hope. You don't need text to explain it. These symbols have centuries of meaning baked right into them.
But now, it's very different.
Now, especially with the rise of the secular memorial card and celebration of life services, we see a shift toward what the sources call natural elements and, most importantly, candid photos.
So instead of that formal studio portrait where the person is like 65 and wearing a suit they hated?
Right, the stiff, posed photo. Families are choosing photos of the deceased actually living, fishing on a lake at sunrise or gardening, or laughing mid-sentence at a family barbecue.
Capturing the vibrancy of lived life, as one source put it.
Yes, it's a move away from this person is dead and we were praying for them to this person lived and look how much joy they had and this is how we want to remember them. It's a celebration of the biography rather than the biology of death.
And the text, what one source called the voice of the card, has changed right along with it. I assumed Psalm 23 was still the king.
It is. Make no mistake, the Lord is my shepherd is still the #1 request across all denominations. It's comforting. It's familiar. Even people who aren't particularly religious know the rhythm of it. It speaks of peace and guidance. The prayer of St. Francis is another classic. But we are seeing a huge modern shift toward what the industry calls celebration of life wording.
And the sources listed some specific poems that are now very common. What was the first one? Afterglow.
Afterglow by Helen Lowry Marshall. It starts, I'd like the memory of me to be a happy one. The whole poem is explicitly asking the mourner not to be sad. That is a very modern sentiment, to try and manage the grief of the survivors from beyond the grave. It's almost like the deceased is reaching out to say, it's okay to smile when you think of me.
Which is a huge departure from the Victorian weeping willows.
Night and day. Then you have, do not stand at my grave and weep.
That one is everywhere.
It's everywhere. And it's fascinating because it's almost pantheistic. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. It finds comfort in nature, not necessarily in a specific religious dogma about heaven. It says the person is not on the ground. They are everywhere in the world around you. It's extremely popular for people who were hikers, sailors, or just generally love the outdoors, or for those who were churchgoers.
It reframes death not as an end, but as a dispersal into the beauty of the world.
A beautiful way to put it. And then for a more traditional but still narrative feel, there's a poem called Safely Home, which tells the story of arriving in heaven and being greeted by Jesus. So you have this whole spectrum of options, from strict scripture to nature poetry to narrative comfort.
But the biggest hurdle in creating the content isn't actually choosing the poem, it's the photo.
Oh, the approval bottleneck.
The bottleneck. The sources emphasize this over and over. The biggest delay in printing these cards isn't the printing press running slow. It's the family sitting around a kitchen table trying to agree on which photo to use. I can just imagine the arguments. Mom hated that picture of her hair, or his eyes are kind of closed in that one, or that picture's 20 years old, he didn't look like that.
It's deeply, deeply emotional. You are choosing the single image that will represent this person forever. For future generations who never met them, this is what great-grandpa looked like. The pressure is immense.
So what's the advice from the experts?
The advice is simple, but very hard to follow in the moment. Choose the photo that makes people say, yes, that's a great photo, but that's them. Don't over-edit. Don't try to Photoshop out every wrinkle. Make them look real. Capture their essence, not an idealized version.
Yes, that's them. I love that. That's the real goal. Not, yes, that's a flattering angle, but yes, that captures their soul. Now, we've been talking a lot about Western traditions, obviously, but this need to remember is global. The card itself, though, seems to be a very Western thing.
The physical wallet-sized card is largely a Western Christian heritage phenomenon, yes. And even within that, there's a Western divide. As we said, Catholics have the strongest and most integrated tradition. For Protestants, it's more varied. Conservative denominations will stick to scripture, while more liberal ones lean toward biography, poetry, and nature imagery.
But what about Jewish traditions? The sources were pretty clear that these cards aren't really a thing.
Right. Jewish tradition doesn't really do prayer cards in this sense at all. The focus is different. The core concepts are zikron, which means remembrance, and mitzvot, which means good deeds. The memorialization is tied to action.
So instead of handing out a piece of paper with a memory on it,
You do something in their memory. You light a yahrzeit candle, a special memorial candle that burns for 24 hours on the anniversary of their death. Or, very commonly, the family will ask for tzedakah charity donations to a cause the person cared about, instead of flowers.
so the memory fuels a good deed.
Exactly. The memory becomes an active force for good in the world. And in synagogues, you'll see yahrzeit walls, which are memorial walls with small plaques with the person's name and a light next to it that is lit on their anniversary. So the memorial is an action, or it's a permanent fixture in the community, rather than a pocket souvenir.
That's a beautiful distinction. Action versus object. One is dynamic, the other is static.
It's a different philosophy of memory. One keeps the memory alive through doing good in the world. The other keeps the memory alive through a tangible, personal connection.
And what about Eastern traditions, like Buddhism or Hinduism?
Also very different. In many Buddhist traditions, the focus is on merit-making and helping the consciousness of the deceased through the 49-day transition period, the bardo. Chanting sutra so, sound, is far more important than a physical card. And dana, which is charity or generosity, is believed to transfer merit to the deceased to help them achieve a favorable rebirth.
So the focus is on their journey, not on our memory.
Precisely. It's about aiding the transition of the spirit, not anchoring it here with us. And in Hindu traditions, the emphasis is on the soul's release, or moksha, which is facilitated by cremation. The funeral is often characterized by simplicity. Mourners dress in white, and typically there are no flowers or gifts. A physical keepsake like a prayer card is rare, because the ultimate goal is release from the cycle of rebirth, not holding on to the physical form or identity.
So the prayer card is really a specific solution to a specific cultural way of viewing death, mostly a Western Christian-influenced desire to hold on to and preserve the individual identity.
That's a perfect summary. It's about the preservation of the self.
Okay, let's pivot to the practical side, the business of grief. Because as much as this is spiritual and psychological, it's also an industry, and it runs on a very, very tight clock.
The rush economy. This is where the rubber meets the road. Funerals typically happen 3 to 7 days after a person dies. That is a microscopic window to get everything done. In those 3 or 4 days, the family has to choose a casket, a burial plot, music, flowers, write eulogies, contact family, and design, approve, and print hundreds of these cards.
It's an impossible timeline. And the sources mentioned same-day printing as a standard.
It has to be. If you order from a professional service by, say, 12:00 p.m. Central Time, they print and ship that same day. They have to. Grief doesn't wait for standard shipping times. If the cards arrive the day after the funeral, they have failed at their one primary job.
Now, we live in a DIY world. I can design a logo in 5 minutes on my phone, so naturally people are trying to DIY these cards using tools like Microsoft Word or, more commonly now, Canva. But the sources had a lot of warnings about this.
Yes, the tech frustration factor. Look, Canva is a great tool for making a social media graphic, but it doesn't know about the physical realities of professional printing. It doesn't know about folds and trims.
Folds and trims, what does that mean?
Well, when a professional printer prints a big sheet with, say, 8 cards on it, and then brings a giant guillotine blade down to cut them, there is a tiny margin of error. It's called bleed. If you put text right up to the edge of your design in Canva, it might get chopped off when the blade comes down.
Oh, no.
Or you might not have the bleed set up right, which is extra image area that gets trimmed off, so you end up with a weird, unprofessional-looking white line on the edge of your cards.
And what about blurry photos? That seems like the biggest risk.
That's the classic DIY mistake.
Yeah.
A photo looks great on your phone screen, which is small and backlit, but when you go to print it at 300 DPI dots per inch on paper, it turns into a pixelated mess. The resolution requirements for high-quality print are much, much higher than for a screen. You spend hours designing it. You rush to the print shop, and you print it out, and suddenly your loved one looks like a character from an old video game. That is heartbreaking when you are already grieving.
So the pros, like the funeral program site or a good local funeral home, they handle all that technical stuff. They check for that.
They do. They offer the done-for-you service. Their designers will spot a low-res photo and warn you. They know how to set up the files for perfect printing. And frankly, during acute grief, you are suffering from what psychologists call decision fatigue. You don't have the mental bandwidth to be fighting with a printer jam or wondering why the margins look wrong at 2 a.m.
So the cost difference is for peace of mind.
It is. The cost difference may be $50 to $150 online versus maybe saving $30 or $40 doing it yourself is often worth it just to have one less thing to worry about. Plus, they do things like professionally round the corners.
The rounded corners, it sounds so trivial, but it makes such a difference.
It's a huge difference. It makes the card feel finished and professional. And practically, sharp corners get bent and dog-eared in a wallet very quickly. Rounded corners last longer. It's a small detail that screams quality and care.
Let's talk numbers. How many do you actually order? The math seems tricky. You don't want to run out, but you don't want 500 left over.
The rule of thumb from all the sources is pretty consistent. Calculate 1 per expected attendee, and then add a 20 to 30% cushion on top of that.
Why such a big cushion?
2 main reasons. 1, people take extras. They'll take 1 for their mom who is too ill to come, or 1 for their sibling who lives overseas, or 1 for their scrapbook. 2, the immediate family always wants a reserve. You will want these in a year or 5 years to give to someone who asks. You don't want to run out on the day of the service. It's better to have a small box of extras in the closet than an empty basket at the funeral home door.
Better to have leftovers than an empty basket. That's a good rule for life, probably.
Always.
Okay, now, we are firmly in the 21st century, and even these centuries-old funeral cards are getting a tech upgrade. We're talking QR codes.
This is the digital portal. This is where things get really interesting. It completely transforms the function of the card. Suddenly, this 2.5-inch piece of paper isn't just a static image in a prayer anymore. It's a key.
A key to what? You scan the code on the back, and where does it take you?
It can take you to an infinite archive. It can link to an online memorial page or guest book where people can share stories. It can link to a live stream of the service for people who couldn't travel, which became absolutely huge during the pandemic.
A true hybrid funeral.
Exactly. It can also link to a video, tribute a photo montage set to music of the person's life. Or, very practically, it can link directly to a charity donation portal for the family's chosen cause.
It bridges the physical and the digital worlds. But I'm guessing there are technical gotchas here, too.
Oh, absolutely. The first is what printers call the quiet zone.
The quiet zone. Sounds like a sci-fi movie.
It's the empty white space that needs to surround the QR code. If you crowd the code with text or images, the phone camera can't distinguish the code from the background noise. It can't find the edges. It won't scan. You need a buffer zone.
And the resolution has to be perfect, I assume.
Must be 300 DPI, vector, if possible. If the code is fuzzy or pixelated, it won't work. And here's a big one most people would never think of. The gloss issue. Glare. If you print a QR code on a highly glossy reflective card, the reflection of the overhead lights can blind the camera sensor. The code becomes unreadable. So if you're going to use the QR code, you often need a matte finish, or at least a matte spot on the back where the code is printed.
That is a detail I never, ever would have thought of. And what about privacy? Because putting a digital portal on a card means that all that data, the guest book, the videos, it all lives somewhere on a server.
That is a major and growing consideration. The expert sources note the rise of SOC2 compliant data protection for digital memorials. You need to know that the company hosting that digital guestbook isn't going to sell that data or get hacked or simply go out of business in 2 years, leaving you with a dead link. You want that digital legacy to be safe for generations.
Speaking of generations, let's look to the future. Where is all this going? Are we just going to have, like, holograms at funerals?
Well, maybe. We're seeing two diverging paths, really. One is very high-tech, and the other is very high-nature.
Okay, let's do the nature path first.
Sustainability. The sources call them eco-friendly turns. The most prominent example is seed paper.
I love this idea so much.
It's beautiful, isn't it? The card is made of a biodegradable paper that's embedded with wildflower seeds. So after the service, you don't throw it in a drawer or a box. You take it home and you plant it in your garden, and it grows into flowers. The memorial literally becomes living.
That solves the disposable feeling in a completely different and beautiful way. It's meant to be disposed of, but with a purpose.
Exactly. It returns to the earth and creates new life. We're also seeing a lot more recycled paper substrates and soy-based inks. The industry is responding to the consumer desire for greener, more sustainable funeral practices.
Okay, so that's the high nature path. What's the high tech path?
Augmented reality.
Yeah.
AR. This is what the sources call the next frontier. Imagine pointing your smartphone at a flat photo on a prayer card, and on your screen, the photo comes to life as a short video. It moves, it smiles. Or maybe you hear a recording of the deceased's voice delivering a short favorite message.
Wow. That feels a little Black Mirror to me. A little bit like a haunting.
It definitely raises some profound ethical and emotional questions. Is it comforting, or is it uncanny and unsettling? But if the fundamental goal of this object is to keep the presence of the loved one vibrant, AR is the logical next step. We went from a static woodcut of a saint to a static photograph to a QR code linking to a video to an embedded video hologram.
It's just the medium changing, but the human desire is exactly the same. Don't let them be gone.
Don't let them be gone. That's it.
So we've designed and printed the perfect cards. Maybe they have seeds in them. Maybe they have AR triggers. Now we have to actually get them into people's hands. Let's talk etiquette.
Distribution, yes.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, but it can be awkward. You don't want to be aggressively shoving cards at people who are actively crying.
No, definitely not. So what are the best, most respectful methods?
The silent handout is the classic method. Ushers or funeral home staff stand at the door and hand one to each person as they arrive. It's passive and respectful. No words needed.
Or the table method.
Right. The visitation table. You place a stack of them in a nice basket or on a tray near the guest book. People can choose to take one if they want. It removes any sense of pressure or obligation.
And what about for all the people who couldn't make it to the service?
The mail out. This is a really lovely gesture. You include a card inside the thank you notes you send out for flowers or donations. It makes the recipient, who might live across the country, feel included in the service they had to miss.
That's a great touch. One last specific category the sources mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, pet loss.
Yes. This is becoming much more common, and it's a reflection of how our relationship with pets has changed.
Is it weird to some people to have a prayer card for a dog or a cat?
It might be to some. But the expert advice in the sources is unequivocal, and I think it's perfect. It says, if it helps your heart, it is appropriate.
I like that rule. That should be the rule for everything in grief.
It should. Grief is grief. The loss is real. If you need a small card with a photo of your golden retriever and a short blessing to put on your fridge to help you process that loss, you should absolutely do it. It follows the exact same format. The photo, their name, their dates, a short blessing. It validates the loss. It acknowledges that a significant bond was broken.
If it helps your heart, it is appropriate. I'm holding on to that. So we have covered a lot of ground today.
We really have.
We started with a piece of paper, and we ended up on a journey through medieval history, material science, semiotics, and digital innovation.
It really is a window into the human condition, isn't it? We looked at the taxonomy, learning that a program is a guide for the day, but a prayer card is a keepsake for a lifetime.
We traced the deep history, all the way from pilgrims buying souvenirs in 1423 to Civil War soldiers needing ID tags just to have their names remembered.
We really geeked out on the physics of touch. why a 100-pound paper feels important in your hand, and why lamination is like armor for a memory.
We looked at the content, the semiotics, and how we moved from St. Anthony to candid fishing photos and poems like Afterglow.
We saw the global context, how different cultures anchor memory through objects, like in the West, or through actions, like in Jewish and Buddhist traditions.
And we looked at the business of it all and the future, the stress of the rush economy, the promise of QR codes and seed paper, and that eternal struggle of DIY versus done for you.
And through all of it, it all comes back to that one central idea we started with, the manageable anchor.
A manageable anchor in a chaotic time. I think that's what I'm going to take away from this. That when we lose someone, the world feels too big and too empty, and we need something small and heavy to hold on to.
Precisely. To make it real again.
So here is a final provocative thought for you to mull over as we close. We talked about augmented reality and digital portals in these infinite online archives. As we move further toward these digital legacies, are we losing the profound weight of the physical object? Is a hologram that appears on your phone screen the same as a worn-out laminated card that's been in your wallet for 30 years?
Or are we simply finding new ways to do the same ancient job? New ways to ensure that, as the sources say, those who have passed are never truly gone as long as their memory is carried in the pockets of those who love them.
Whether that pocket is made of leather or of pixels, something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.